Permission
All
granted.
right.
There we go.
Okay, so talking about check-in today, we're probably actually going to spend this week and next week talking about check-in, just because there's a lot of moving pieces to this puzzle that we have. But Linda, we have two things that we're really looking at. We have the infrastructure within the software, so what has to be built in to the software to make children's check-in work. But then we also have the infrastructure outside the software. So what kind of equipment are we going to use? How are we going to train our volunteers? Where are we going to place the stations that we're going to use for check-in? So today, what we want to start with today is talking about the internal infrastructure of check-in. So talking about what needs to be in the system for you to be able to start running this. And then next week, we'll cover any questions that you might have over the course of this next week, as well as just kind of talk about what your facility looks like, where we're going to be placing these stations, as well as just thinking through training the volunteers. How does that sound to you?
Great.
Awesome. Okay, so Linda, we're going to start today's call just kind of talking through maybe what you're doing currently, maybe some pain points that you're experiencing with this, and then we'll run into this.
Can't use my name.
We don't want to talk about my pain points. We'll just move over that.
Linda, do we need to have everyone else leave the room so it's just you and I talking on this call?
No, actually, everybody in this room has made it that much easier to work with what we have. So your first question basically was?
Like, what are you doing currently? Do you have anything in place currently for children's check-in?
Yes, we're using the check-in version of Servant Keeper, and
3 kiosks.
we have 3 kiosks, and because of the inavailability for the iCloud of Servant Keeper, and all of the Wi-Fi that's going on our Sunday morning, we have to hardwire everything. And so one kiosk connects hardwired to the next kiosk, to the next kiosk, so we're actually stuck in this corner with all 3 check-ins right next to a door. So major traffic jam, and it does not communicate to our printers quickly. So there's lots of time, anywhere from 10 seconds to maybe even a minute before the name tag prints.
Yikes.
Printers. They're Dymo printers. And the way this software program is set up is it's not, I guess the word is versatile, where I had to go in there and the features that were available to us, I had to Mickey Mouse. Because what we do is we want somebody to be able to come in and check in all their children. We have 2 services, so we definitely want to be able to check them into both services if needed. And then we also want a parent-guardian location because we have lots of things happening on our campus, but the only place that we can actually page a parent is in this auditorium through a media program at the sound booth where we can put a number at. So there's a number system. So there's a limited amount of space when you go to check in a child that says this is the room we're checking them into, this is the age or grade, and then we also had to abbreviate where the parent guardian location was. So there's a lot of stuff you have to read just to check a child in. So our volunteers are sometimes once a month, and it's almost like relearning it. They're checked in to the best of the ability of the volunteer, but because of the inaccuracy of everything, we have to do handwritten rosters in the classroom.
Okay.
And we struggle sometimes with, even though it's hardwired, the program isn't always up and running. So I would say every 6 weeks we probably have to do handwritten, do the old-fashioned way.
Okay. Okay. Man, I see why you didn't want to talk about pain points, because you have a few, it sounds like, with this. That sounds kind of like that's been a frustrating process, really kind of through and through. Linda, I have a couple of questions for you based on what you said. So first off, can you talk to me about your volunteers? Are they the same volunteers week over week? Are they going to be different every week? Do they serve in the same classrooms? Like, talk me through what your volunteer structure looks like for your children's area.
I'll begin at the check-in system. I have a leader that oversees the check-in system. I was hoping she would be here. She is the one that coordinates the volunteer staff for check-in. And most of the check-in works, there's 3 staff plus the leader every service. So there can be up to 7 people each Sunday, and most of them come once a month. Some will come twice a month, okay? And then we have birth through 5th grade. And we have open 8 to 9 classrooms each service. That covers birth through 5th grade. And there's up to 2 adults in every classroom. We also use our check-in system for what we refer to as our HIT team, which is our helpers in training. It's a lay ministry of children's ministry. It's the junior high and high school, so we can keep account of who's, because that's part of that ministry, is serving and keeping track of that.
Are your teachers, since you paused there, are your teachers the same in the classroom every week?
So their schedules can be once a month, every week, or even bi-weekly. It's not a consistent across the board.
Okay.
And they do come in with us, and we write it on the hand roster. So.
Okay. Now, as far as the kiosks are concerned, are these kiosks that need to be manned by a volunteer, or can parents walk up and check themselves, or like type in information and check themselves in?
They were purchased with the idea that parents could eventually check themselves in. There's a capability of that, but because of the software itself, it is not user-friendly. I mean, it's like reading Spanish if you don't know Spanish. So as far as the equipment question, what our plan is to actually go mobile and have iPads so that we can spread out our check-in, have preschool in one area, kids church in another, and then have a floater, if you will, for spending one-on-one time with our new families at check-in. That's the way we want to be able to implement it.
Okay, excellent. And then when you're checking children into the services, you said you have 2 services that you check into on a Sunday morning. Are you do you give? Let me start over. Do you have the ability to check in like the child to both services at once, or is it like we're going to check into the first service and then we need to check them into the second service as well?
We can check them into both services, but there is a limitation. For example, you can only check a child in to 3 certain things. So if a child is staying for 2 services, our parent guardian location is that 3rd service because there's no way to track where the parents are. So you're limited on what you can actually do with the child and to find the parent.
And the parents are usually in a different location for each service as well.
Yeah.
So that needs to be.
Serving.
Yeah, if a child is here for more than 1 service, we need to make sure we keep track of where the parents are.
Okay.
So that complicates things a lot. But with the texting feature, that eliminates that, and we can, anything can be on campus on a Sunday for a child, and we can check them into multiple things, is what I understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's why I asked that question, is just trying to get an understanding of where you're at currently, because, what I'm hearing out of all of these answers is that there is going to be some change taking place with how all of this operates and works. And so that's one thing that I'm kind of hearing on the underlying theme of all of this, is that this is going to change the way we do things. But the other thing that I'm hearing is that we maybe need to look at a well-defined process for what this is going to look like on a Sunday morning, especially since we are switching some things up as far as like how this is going to operate. So, yeah, I think that texting feature will definitely help you. That way you don't have to constantly, have a map with where the parents are in the building. So that'd be nice.
And the feature sounds as though a parent really can go in there and check in all their children with clarity of what they need to choose from. And that is incredibly key. One of the things Tom had showed me when we first started looking at this at the church community builder was some of our classrooms are broken down by age, some of them are grades, and then some are different for first service and second service. And so the flexibility of being able to get in there at any season throughout the year and change that.
They were really married to the way that it's set right now. They can't really change it very easily.
It's pretty black and white.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll be able to work within what you have currently, but and keep that structure so that we can make it easier to monitor and easy to work with. I have one more question, and then we're going to start talking through kind of some of the things that you talked about. So after a parent checks in their child, does the parent walk the child to the classroom? Is there a volunteer who takes the child to the classroom they're in? Like, walk me through what that process looks like.
They're greeted at the check-in through the check-in system, and then usually myself and or the check-in leader is there. Our church is big, but it's yet small enough where half the children will just run to their class if they're old enough to do that. Check-in.
Okay.
Yeah, check-in is close to preschool, so the parents usually would walk them in there, and or the kids will go. If they're new, they're definitely walked by an adult, one of our volunteers. So I think it's more of kind of accompanied by one of our staff members. Yeah.
Well, and all the older classrooms are down a hallway.
Quite a
So like all the like kindergarten and under?
K through 5th. Oh,
But the smaller kids.
Yeah, 1st through 5th
those 3 classrooms
is really close to check-in area.
Okay.
All within the same little area.
Yes.
And so like if you picture the building was never set up with check-in in mind.
Of course.
So,
The new building.
like the new building, like with check-in in mind. So like there's kind of a little teeny foyer that they've taken over for the children.
Okay.
And people still, whether they have children or not,
They still come through there, yeah. It's awful.
Along with all the children.
That's awesome.
Can I ask a question, Luke?
Sure.
With this new check-in system, will it have the capability for the junior high and high school to also use the same check-in system rather than having to do it after the fact as an attendance base?
Yeah. Yeah, it all depends on where, I mean, to be honest, it all depends on where the stations are going to be. But as far as the software is concerned, you can run check-in for whoever you want. I mean, it doesn't have to be just children. So,
so I mean, what we were thinking is baseline in possibly high school. Right now, what the ladies do is they end up taking attendance, and then after the fact, they have to input it so they can have some type of attendance tracking. They don't end up using the name tags, like they don't use that. So she just wants to make sure that the capabilities, like on their own personal iPad or whatever, they could do check-in, and it seemed like we would be able to do that.
Yeah, and there's a couple of options with that. I mean, if it's solely for like attendance purposes, you can actually take attendance via like a smartphone. It'll send you a reminder and you can take attendance that way. But you can also run check-in as well for the junior high and high school. So it really is just up to you guys and how you want to structure that. One last question for you, Linda, and then we're going to move forward. How many kids are you checking in on average on a Sunday?
100, yeah. I mean, it can anywhere.
Like an average Sunday is about 100?
I would,
Plus or minus.
yeah.
Those whole night.
Really?
Well, and we're,
But
well, and then, 50 just for kids' church.
But then you're high in high school though, if you're.
And our staff. So I would say also our staff, because we keep track of that. Did you just ask for children or everything into? Really
looking at children, but if you consider staff as well, like how many staff are going to be checking in on a Sunday?
Oh, and our church wants us to track the children, our staff, and all of that. So on average Sunday, we would be checking in about 125 people, including every ministry.
But that's fifth and down, that's not including junior high or high school.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure, yeah. And that's kind of what I was thinking is just what we're doing currently. So this is 5th grade and below and staff.
Yes.
Okay.
Based on high school, they can take attendance on their phone.
Sure.
All right. So I think that based on, Linda, kind of what you walked through here, I think this is going to be an improvement for you. I also think this is going to be, there's probably going to be some growing pains with this as we launch this out, just to kind of get everything in place. We may have to change the way that we approach things. I don't know exactly what this is going to look like when you guys start to use it. But the one thing that I would encourage you to start doing is talking to your parents about a new check-in system coming, and start that process now. Okay, if you haven't already, you're on it. That way that it's not a shocker when they walk in for the first time and they're like, whoa, this doesn't make any sense at all. So really starting to make them aware of what's coming. And the one thing that I would encourage you to talk to them about is this idea of, you mentioned you have 3 kiosks all wired into one area, and because of the way the software works currently, you have to have volunteers manning those stations, and it becomes a real bottleneck. I think one thing, when we're talking about change management, we start with that awareness piece, but I think the desire piece, the what's in it for your parents, could be talking about, relieving that bottleneck, that it won't be something where we're all, gathered in this one place waiting to make this happen. So start thinking through that and thinking about what's in it for your parents specifically, not just, hey, we have a new system coming, but what are the wins going to be for your parents as we go through this process? Now, I
don't think we're going to have to put much effort into selling this. Of the patients they've already shown with when we have to, when you have to handwrite. So honestly, I think with the enthusiasm of just having something different, we'll be happy for everyone.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like it. I want to talk just a little bit about the idea of using iPads for check-in. I think that, especially with the setup that you have, I think it's a really good idea to have that. I have 2 concerns with that as I'm thinking through here. Number one, that is probably the most expensive check-in equipment setup. Because if you're looking at buying iPads, I worked for Apple for 5 years. I know iPads are going to start right around $400 per iPad to get that set up. And the other thing about that is the iPad only works with one printer if you're wanting to print labels. And that printer is also very expensive to get. So I would encourage you before you officially 100% say, this is what we're doing, I would encourage you to look into the cost of it. Because I have had churches before who we start this conversation, they're like, oh yeah, we're going to use iPads and use the check-in app, and then they get to looking at it and they're like, never mind, we don't have the budget for this. So
and his homework on that, and of course we want to have the equipment that will make us most successful and efficient and beneficial all the way around, from behind the counter as well as in front of the counter with families. The kiosks that we have are like 6
years old.
7 years old.
okay.
They are touch screen, they are user friendly. My huge fear is that we separate them, assume we're gonna work with Wi-Fi, which we put a router right into our area, and we're gonna have slow process. I'm really concerned about that. So what does that look like with our existing?
Well, and that's the second concern that I had, Linda. So if you are experiencing pains already with connecting, your older computers to the Wi-Fi network and you're having to hardwire them, you're going to experience the same pains with the iPads. I mean, the iPads have to connect to that network as well. And so either you're going to have to re-network that area and boost the signal somehow, or create a separate network that the iPads strictly connect to, so that you're not having any other traffic on that specific wireless network.
Do the Androids have the same problem with only being able to print out on one printer as well?
Well, the Android, if you're using an Android tablet, so first off, I have literally bagel experience with Android, period. I've been an Apple guy for about the last 10 years. But the one thing that I do know about them is the Android has to have a computer that it's connecting to print. So it's not like you're physically wired to it, but essentially you're sending that label to a printer or to a computer that will print it from there.
Print off at my house.
It's to the label maker, though.
Oh, to the label maker.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So that is something to consider as well, as if you're going to use an Android tablet, it has to go through a computer to get to that label printer.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay. So those are just a couple of things, just based on what you said, that I wanted to make sure that we
Can I ask you a follow-up question to your question?
Sure.
So the churches that have gone to the iPads and the printers, the more expensive stuff, have they been happy with the way that process works? Or had they wished that, we should have stayed with our desktop computers?
Right.
Or, because I do have the money budgeted, I could
Sure.
buy 6 computers or 3 iPads, so.
Right.
Right? So,
so 2 things with that, Thomas. You're absolutely not going to want to get rid of your computers 100%. Because the only thing that the iPad can do is self-check-in, meaning parents can check themselves in. So, if I'm a volunteer, I'd walk up to a parent and say, hey, are you ready to check in your kids? And essentially turn the iPad around or capture information from them, plug it in so I can check their kids in. You're not going to be able to capture new people or check in new children from the iPad itself.
Well, they need the personal touch anyway when they're.
Well, and I don't want to lose my staff. I still want my staff there, whether we.
Oh, absolutely.
So, okay, that's
So
really good.
the reason I'm telling you that is because I haven't worked with too many churches who have gone 100% iPads. Typically what a church will do is they'll have 3 or 4 computers set up. They'll have a couple of them be what we call man stations, which is a specific way of setting it up where somebody is actually manning that station, checking people in. They'll have a couple of computers that are self-check-in, meaning parents can walk up, check their children in themselves, and then depending on the traffic flow, they'll have 1 or 2 people walking around with iPads helping check in, anybody who's been waiting in line for a long time. So that's the typical setup. So I haven't worked with too many churches who have said, we're going to go with really all iPads and then just a couple of computers off to the side.
Well, if we can boost our signal and go wireless with the kiosks that we have, the physical stations that they're on can be separated for sure, and that makes a big difference. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah, so a lot of this conversation that we're having today, I want to make sure that you guys are continuing to kind of think through this over the course of the next week, because we're going to continue to talk a lot about this next week as we're seeing what the system's capable of, as we start to identify, okay, that's how that's going to work. Here's what we need to focus on. I'm hoping that what we cover today is going to maybe open up a gate for more discussion around how are we going to approach this? What are we going to focus on? So let's dive into the system and start taking a look at what it's going to take to build into the system. Linda, I'm going to apologize to you because you're the first person who has a lot of work to do in the system. So we get to pick on you first here at the beginning. So what we're going to talk about today, my goal is to try to make it as easy as possible, but there is going to be quite a bit of work coming in for you starting really today. So I just want to give you a heads up of that. What we're going to do today, it's going to be really easy work. It's not like it's going to be, something that you're struggling with, but it is going to require quite a bit to be done as we go through. So just to prepare you for that, so next week you're not, Lucas, you didn't tell me it was going to be this much. Well, yeah, I did, so. All right, so you should be seeing my screen here, which is your site currently. And so first thing, we need to have three things really built into the system, Linda. The first one is we need to build in a group. Really everything in our system, when we're talking check-in, attendance, calendaring, everything comes out of a group. It's kind of the foundation for what we're doing. So the first thing you have to have is a group. The second thing that you're going to be building into the system is events. Because in order for us to run check-in, we have to have an event in the system to attach to, okay? And then the final thing is what we call saved setups. So that way, when you're ready to start running check-in on a Sunday morning, you just go to your browser, you click a button, sign in with the password, and you're ready to start checking people in. It's not like this cumbersome, okay, I have to choose all of this stuff to set it up.
Not going to take you half an hour?
No. It may take you half an hour to build it, but after that, it's like super quick to get it going. So.
You're my new best friend.
And then Linda, this isn't something that I consider building into the system, but once migration is complete, your last task is going to be populating the groups that you've created, which is actually adding the children in to those groups. So we're going to start with building a group and just kind of showing you a couple of things to be aware of. For the rest of the people in the room, don't look at this as, oh, this is how we're going to build groups in the system, because we're really just building these groups for check-in purposes only. So it's going to be a very quick process, and we're not going to spend a lot of time debriefing on all of the options. So, Linda, in the system, when you click on groups on the left-hand side, you've got the option of creating or adding a new group over here to the right. And so, Linda, what we're going to do is we're going to build a group today, and then you're going to actually be able, I'm going to show you how to duplicate this group so you don't have to do what we're about to do, 30 times if you're going to end up having 30 groups, okay? So let's start off. What would be, like if you're thinking of your classrooms as a group, what would be a classroom that we would put down here?
The 2 and 3-year-olds.
Okay. Now, do you have it as the 2 and 3-year-olds? Or do you spell it out?
No, 2-3-year-olds, and we wouldn't need that. Just
Excellent.
2 and 3-year-olds.
2-3.
Yeah, 2 to 3.
Okay. Now, on this general tab here, Linda, the only thing that I would encourage you to think about is uploading a photo for the group. And all this is just a visual identification in the system of what that group is. And I'll give you an example. I actually was talking to a church the other day that they had their kids do finger painting, like for their group, and then they all selected like the best one and took a picture of that and used it as the picture for their group. So they got their kids involved with, what the picture was. So just an idea for you, and to also show that it's not something that really anyone else is going to see. It's just representative of what's in the system.
Now, for example, a lot of reference goes to the classroom number. Would that be in the title as well? So 2 and 3-year-olds room 201? Or
you could do that for sure. Absolutely.
Or would it be added somewhere else?
You would probably want to do it in the title of the group itself.
All right.
Well, hold on just a second. Let me take that back. You wouldn't want it in the group title. You'd want it in the event title.
Okay.
My apologies.
I wasn't sure if it was there or somewhere else. 2 and 3-year-olds would be obvious for their parent checking in.
Yes. Okay. So, Linda, when you're oh wait, I'll hang on just a moment.
Sorry.
You're good.
Thank you, sorry.
You're good. We're having fun. So, Linda, you're really going to skip over the when and where, because this is for like groups that are going to be put in, like if they're meeting off-site of the church. So I wouldn't worry about that at all.
Okay.
And then just a couple of things here under the options tab. Number one, we want to keep your check-in groups to announce only. We have different interactions types, so like members interact, administrative. We want to leave that as announce only, because your kids aren't necessarily going to be interacting in the group, and an administrative group is very restrictive. So we want to leave this as an announce only. And depending on how you are with children and like your children's groups, I would uncheck this box here and say we don't want logged in users to be able to see that group.
Now, can I ask you a question? Will she be able to communicate with the people in this group?
You're not going to want to, because this is going to be the 2 and 3-year-old children.
Not their parents.
Yeah.
Not their parents. Yeah. So now that's a good question, though, and I want to explain. You will be able to do, when we get to this point, you'll be able to communicate to the parents of this group. You won't need a group for the parents to communicate with them. Okay, as long as that's all set up, and it should be. So, Linda, that's the only things under the option tab, is make sure you leave it as announce only and uncheck listed. But since we're going to be duplicating this group, I don't know that that's going to be too much of an issue. Now, there's a couple of things I want to point out here on the admin tab. The first being this wonderful little box right here that I absolutely love, which is the months old range. Okay. Now, the thing with this is, let's say you have a new family coming in, and they're checking in their children. Okay. At a manned station in our software, if you capture their age, okay, then this will be a representation and pull up and say, hey, based on the child's age that you entered, this would be the group that they would go into. So it wouldn't be searching on your volunteer's part, going, okay, so they're 3-year-olds, which group are they going to go in? Like, I need to think through what this is. So this is a nifty little tool that will really help streamline the check-in process for new guests and their children, and it will simplify how much information your volunteers are having to sift through.
That's beautiful.
Is it modifiable? Because some kids might be in a grade above or below their age.
Suggestion.
Right.
Yeah. It's
You know?
So if they turn 4 on Wednesday, they come to check in, it'll automatically bump them up to the 4 and 5-year-old room.
As long as you have this set up correct. Now, if you'll notice, the key is months old, so it's not years old. So you'd want to like do the actual months. So don't do like, well, this is 6-year-olds to 8 years old, because that would read it as 6 to 8 months.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so make sure you're not putting this in as years, but putting it in as months.
And the way that works,
Yeah.
when they end up capturing the information, is that calculated by a birthday, or when they tell you my kid is 7 years old?
No, you will want to capture the birth date of the child. And you're going to want to do this for 2 reasons. Number one, if you have this set, it'll make a recommendation for the group that you're going to put the child into. But number 2, you want to capture that birth date so that child is hidden in the system based on that child age threshold. If you don't capture a birth date at check-in, anybody's going to be able to see that child in the system.
So I want to clarify, capturing the birthday and adding that to the system, will that automatically fill in that month of?
You have to do this.
Do that? Okay, all right, got it.
Your
Okay,
setup.
got it. Ooh.
He answered it for me.
All right.
Okay. Now, for you specifically, Linda, since your teachers and your volunteers are kind of on a rotating basis, and you don't have anything consistent, that you're going to have, you will probably end up being the group leader in most of these groups, just because you're creating them. And so, since that's the case, I would not worry about any of these settings right here, about allow group leaders to just leave it the way it is, because since you're going to be the group leader for the most part, then this has no bearing on you or anybody in the group, which is just going to be your children. Okay.
She also has some staff, Natalia, who is going to be in charge of this, and Teresa.
And Cindy, yeah.
Yeah, she has about 3 staff that end up helping. So that may change.
Well, I think we'll sit down together and do this.
Okay.
So.
Sure.
Tom, can more than one person be the leader of that, or how does that
work?
Well,
you have one group leader, and then you could have as many assistant leaders as you want. The assistant leader in the group has just as much access as the group leader. It's just we name it different in the system. So this may be an area to look at if you want to make any changes to this. But last and definitely not least is attendance groupings. Now, we're going to have a whole conversation about attendance groupings when we start talking about attendance specifically. But one thing to know about attendance groupings is this is what we consider a 10,000-foot approach to your attendance. Okay? So, Linda, if you want to see, I want to see my kids' attendance as a whole for all of my children's areas, then you would probably want to have Thomas go in and add a children's attendance grouping, like children's services, something like that. If that's not something that you're looking for, you can make this just like a weekend service, and it will lump the children in with all of the weekend services that are happening.
We'll definitely want it separate.
Specific.
Yes. So, Thomas, that's an action item for you, is to go in and add this. This will be in your customizable fields. So you'll want to add something like children's services into that.
Okay.
Since we don't have that, I'm going to use weekend service for right now.
Would that, when they go in and customize that, could they break that down with preschool and then elementary?
You want to have a 10,000-foot approach. You're going to be able to get that level specifics when we're starting to run attendance reports. So don't think of this as like, I want to dive directly into junior high, high school, anything like that. We're just looking at, I want to look at my children's area. What is my attendance looking like for this? So keep a very high-level approach when we're talking about attendance groupings.
What did you suggest to call that?
It would be anything that you want it to. So I've seen it called like children's services, kids services, kids attendance, anything that just helps you identify that it's your children's area that you're looking at.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so that's all of the settings that we're going to focus on, Linda, for a group. Okay. Now to show you this, you've created your group. Okay. When you go to Group Actions over here, you go to Edit the Group Settings. This is where you get to go back into the settings that we were just looking at. But now you'll also notice over here on the right is Duplicate this group. Okay? When you duplicate the group, there are two things that you need to change. Obviously, number one is the title of the group. And number two is if you want to change the months old range for that second group. So how are you feeling about group creation?
Great.
Love it.
Great.
Awesome.
Well,
So,
I just had a light
you sure?
bulb. Yep, I'm good.
Okay. Awesome. So we're also going to run through the calendar now. Okay. So the group, when you duplicate the group, is going to take all of those settings into a new group. It will not take the calendar, but I'm going to show you how to take the calendar in and duplicate that, because you can do that as well. Okay? So in the calendar, in the group, we're going to say we want to add an event. I told you, there's a lot of work here at the beginning, a lot of detail as well. Now, this screen is going to pop up anytime you're creating a new event in the system. Are rooms and resources going to be needed? Are they not? Linda, I have seen churches take both approaches to this. I've seen churches say, yes, we want rooms and resources attached to this because we want to see in the calendar which rooms are being used for what. I've got other churches who say, they know it's Sunday morning. Our children are always in these rooms. We don't need to say rooms and resources are attached to this. Okay? So for the sake of our conversation today, I'm going to say that we don't need a room or a resource, but this is something that you can come back and change at any point in time. Okay? Now, this is going to be key here for your event names, Linda. So there is...
I'm sorry, they're talking.
I'm sorry, we're talking.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
That's okay, because I was trying to think, I wanted to be able to have a voice in that conversation. That's the reason why I got distracted. Sorry about that, Luke. Can you go back to sentences?
Yes, so there's something that we need to be aware of when we're talking about event names. Okay? So if you're going to have, let's say, 30 groups in the system, okay, what time does your first service start?
9 a.m.
9 a.m. So consider this. If you name every event in the system 9 o'clock a.m. service, you're going to have 30 9 a.m. services on the calendar.
Oh, that's not good.
Okay? So when you're looking at an event name, you want to be specific. And what I typically recommend, especially for check-in, is label it something very similar to the group that you're working with. Okay? So this might look something like this.
CKM, that's our well-known name.
For what now?
CKM, that represents Children's Ministry. That's our acronym.
For this group or for children's ministry as a whole?
Oh.
So you're going to want...
Continue.
Because each classroom is going to be its own group. And if you go in and put 9 o'clock a.m. CKM on all of these calendar events, you're going to have the same event in your list, and it's going to be very difficult to find what it is that you're looking for. So a name for an event is going to look something like this.
9 o'clock, room 201. 9 o'clock, room 202.
Okay? That way, when a parent comes in, they're going to know exactly what they're checking their children into. They're checking them into the 9 a.m. 2 to 3-year-olds room 201 in the system. Okay?
That makes sense.
Okay. Now, you'll do this same thing for your other service. So if it starts at 11, you'll just change this to be 11 a.m., 2 to 3-year-olds room 201, or whatever room they're in. Okay? You don't have to worry about really anything until you get to the event time. Okay? And for check-in purposes specifically, we want to make sure that we're being as specific as possible to when this is going to be happening. So we know it starts at 9. What time does it end?
10:30.
Okay. So it's going 9 to 10:30. And we want to make this event repeat because I only want to have to set this up once. I don't want to do this multiple times. Okay? And believe it or not, Linda, you've just created an event.
Yay!
Done deal.
Question though, when setting the event time 9 to 10:30, it doesn't matter what time they can start checking in? Okay, that was a limitation with the other program.
The reason that we have this is because when you think about your 9 a.m. services on Sunday morning, you're going to have probably a lot of events in the calendar for this, right? If we didn't specify a time when we go to do our saved setups, we would be saying bring everything that's happening on a Sunday. And when your parents go to check in, they're going to get this whole litany of a list of what it is that we're looking at. So by setting a time, we can be very specific with what our saved setup is pulling in.
So can I walk through a scenario real quick? I walk in, I'm staying for both services. I have 4 children. So I check in one of them, and I actually hit their name, I think, and then it brings up their options according to their age, right, or their grade, depending on what we put in as an event. And all those options for that day.
So let's use this room as an example. Linda, if you have put my child in this group, when you go to check in and tap on my name, it is only going to pull up the event for this group for me to check in.
So we have to assign, we're assigning the children then?
Remember what I said, once data migration is complete, you're going to be populating these groups. You're going to be taking the children that we're migrating over and putting them in this group. Okay?
That I did not know.
Yes.
Okay.
That's kind of the final piece of major work that you'll have to do, but that won't happen until migration is complete.
Okay.
Now, another setting here that we have to change, Linda, once you've got the event created, we need to go to check-in, and we need to change some settings here, okay? So we're going to click on check-in settings. Now, remember I talked about that attendance grouping, okay? This is where you're going to set it for the event. You have to have this set in order to be able to run check-in. So that's why we put a little bit of emphasis on it. So since we don't have, like, your children's service, I'm choosing weekend service.
It's already changed.
Linda, if you would like to, you could also put like a room title or a room number in here as well. It's up to you completely. It's not anything that's going to affect it. And then there's a couple of things here just to kind of briefly highlight. I don't know if you guys are going to end up using this. Child to adult ratio says, you know, I only want 8 kids for every adult that's in the classroom. Okay? The misleading part of this is notice how it says adult ratio. It doesn't actually mean adult. It means leader. So however many group leaders are checked in, so let's say you have an 8-to-1 ratio, 8 children to 1 group leader. Once you check in 8 kids, if you only have 1 group leader checked into that specific room or event, it's not going to allow you to check in any more kids until another group leader comes along and checks in. Okay?
Not always time.
Exactly right. Yeah. Same thing for attendance limit. So if you have a room and you say, we can absolutely not have any more than 20 kids in this room, you could set that, and once you reach that, you can, like, the system will not allow you to check in any more kids into that room. So just want to show you that's where it is in the check-in settings, if those are things that you ever want to look into.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Now, very similarly, Linda, under event actions, you can duplicate this event right here. Now, the great thing, and I want to show you a couple of things here, okay? If it's within the same group, all you have to do is go change the time, because you're going to have one at 9 and one at the other service time, okay? But here's the other fun part. Do you see where it says group right here? You could close this out, and if you have another group in the system, you could go start typing the group's name, so you don't have to be in that group to create the event.
Groups first, then do this. That would be faster that way.
Yes. You following me so far?
Yes.
Okay. So, Linda, at that point in time, you've done 2 out of the 3 steps. The great news is we've done both of these steps this morning, so hopefully all that's going to have to happen is an adjustment on a couple of settings, and then you can start duplicating everything that we've done this morning. Okay? We've got 3 minutes left on our call, but I want to see if we can get through attendance groupings. Do you guys have time to stick around for a little bit longer?
Yes, please.
Okay. Excellent. All right. So this next part, Linda, is what's going to save yourself and your volunteers time on Sunday mornings, which is just going to be awesome. So under the settings, the system settings, we have check-in. Okay? Under check-in, we get our saved setups. And I want to show you what would be required of your volunteers or yourself if you did not have this option. Okay? So all of these questions would have to be answered every time you do check-in. So what we're doing is we're answering these questions now. That way all you have to do is log in, the settings are there, you start checking in, done. Okay? So on the setup, what I would recommend is using something like, we're going to say this is going to be like Sunday morning children's check-in, and you can make this whatever you want. This is obviously just an example. And no one is going to see this except for your volunteers. So label it, the one key with this is label it whether it's a manned or a self. You'll save yourself a lot of heartache in the long run. Okay?
Can you change that name after the fact?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. On the password, Linda, I would not recommend doing like 30 characters long combination, letters, numbers, symbols, capital letters, anything like that, because we don't want our volunteers pulling our hair out, when we get there in the morning. So what I've seen most churches do is something like this. Like we're just going to put check-in 1. Obviously you can make this anything you want, but this is not a time to be really good with your password. Like we want this to be fairly quick for our volunteers.
Password.
Yeah. Okay, so the next part here, Linda, is remember we set an attendance grouping for not only the event, but the group as well, okay? So what I'm going to say is I want to bring in any event that has the attendance grouping of weekend services. Once you get this changed, this will be children's services or whatever it is that you want to label that, okay? And we're saying, and have the following start times of 9 a.m. And what time is your other service?
11.
Okay. So we're going to go ahead and say, I want to bring in anything that's starting at 9 or 11. And the reason we're doing this is going to allow parents to check into both of these services at once. One fell swoop. Now down here, we get to identify, is this going to be a manned setup or is this going to be a self setup? And do you remember what the difference is between those two?
We're going to go with manned for now.
Okay.
Manned.
Manned, yes. So what kind of label do you want? Do you want a secure label and a pickup tag, just name tag only, or no labels?
Sure. Yes, we want both.
Perfect. And then do you want one labels or two that typically come out? We give the option.
One label's fine.
Okay.
In preschool, our nursery toddler, we have the diaper bag tag.
So what you could do specifically is, notice we just did this very broad. Sunday morning children's check-in. You know, so this is something that we have to consider for everyone, or we create one station for nursery specifically that's going to print 2 tags.
Okay, and that's very random, so that can probably be, there's that 10,000 foot approach.
There you go. There you go. Now, Linda, here is where you're going to turn on text message paging if you want to allow it. Okay, so we're going to say absolutely, definitely want to use that. Do you use checkout currently for your kids?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, this section here, membership type and report access, Linda, are only going to be available on a manned station. Okay? And the reason we give this is so when you're creating somebody new in the system, so if my wife and I show up, we're visitors, we've never been at your church before, but we have children, and we're going to check them into your services. You're actually at the point of check-in, you can capture my name, my wife's name, all of our information, all of our kids' information. And through this option, you can automatically say, everybody who gets checked in at a manned station is a guest. And it'll automatically label them that way in the system for you. Okay? And then the report access, and this is something that I think you as a children's minister would really appreciate on Sunday mornings with check-in. These reports on a manned station in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, you're going to have a button that says reports, and these reports are going to show you how many kids are checked into each room, you know, really everything you're going to want to know for a quick snapshot of what your morning looks like for check-in.
That's awesome. Could we print something like that each morning after the kids are checked in, and then give it to the class teacher or check out for security reasons, and you know, with the number and all that?
Sure.
Would it be possible?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's from a manned station, right? So it's going to be connected to a printer, number one. So you could pull it up and very easily print it off.
So we can be secure when we check them out, you know, and check up their numbers.
Okay. So we're going to go ahead and save this one, Linda. And this is the part that I love. We now get an opportunity to check our work. Okay? Remember in math class, I always want you to show your work, check your work? Yeah. Okay. So we get to look at, are there any included events coming up for me to look at? And you'll notice Sunday morning, I've got the event that I'm looking at. Okay? So that's good news. Now, I want to give you some tools here, Linda. There are 4 reasons why something would not show up here once you completed a saved setup. Okay? So tell me when you're ready, and I'm going to give you the 4 reasons.
Okay, and this is found on the events page, right?
This is found on the saved setup page. So this is what we're working with, is a saved setup.
Okay.
Okay. Reason number 1 why you may not see anything here is your times don't match up. So if you had put in the event, this event starts at 9:15, but here at the saved setup you said, oh, this event starts at 9, it's not going to find an event starting at 9 o'clock because there's not one. Okay? The second is that it may be because the event has not been approved. So I'm building this as Thomas, which means the event is just going to be approved because I built it. But if you log in and start building events, Thomas may see we need to approve all of these events in the system. There's no real thought process behind that at this point. He just needs to go through and approve them, and then your events would show up here. Okay? The other one, and this is something that we talked about, your attendance grouping is not assigned. Meaning in the event creation, you did not assign an attendance grouping to that event. That's probably one of the most common reasons. And then the last one, Linda, is really going to blow your mind here. It's going to be awesome. We're only seeing 8 days here. So if your event is further out than 8 days, you just won't see it.
Okay.
So you could have everything else in place, but that one you would not believe how many people get caught up on that one, including yours truly when I first started learning the system. Yeah, I spent several hours one day trying to figure out why I couldn't see an event here until I figured out, oh, it's for next weekend, not this upcoming weekend. I won't see it here. So it was a good learning opportunity for me.
Is there
Okay?
a way that the ones that are more than 8 days out?
No. You're only going to see 8 days out. One last thing here, Lyndon, I want to make sure that everything is good and you don't have any lingering questions. This link right here is what you would use for your bookmark in your web browser. So save that as a favorite, name it something like your Sunday morning manned check-in, and then that way all you have to do is click on that link, pull the site up, log in, and you're ready to go.
Okay.
Okay?
Beautiful.
So how do you guys all feel about this? Because there's a lot involved with getting this set up. Linda, I love your face right there. Like, yeah, just a little bit. So.
For me, I'm very visual and hands-on, so it will take for me to sit down with my team and actually walk through that with all of the 3 of us taking notes. I think it'll be just kind of trial and error of how that turns out.
Exactly. And Linda, the great thing is that we've got time for trial and error, you know, to get this entered in before we actually have to launch this. So we've got plenty of time to make sure that all of this is getting in the way that you want it to.
One of the things Tom and I talked about real briefly this morning was a soft start. Once the migration and the population, all that, those terminology, once that's completed, perhaps maybe taking one of the 3 kiosks and just taking our core families and using CCB to check in, kind of test it out, and then use, since we have Servant Keeper, keep that up and going until we really kind of are very familiar and comfortable with the program.
Yeah.
And then,
I think, Linda, one of the things that we recommend is finding what we would call a low-stakes event, meaning it's not like your typical Sunday morning. It may be like a Wednesday night. It could be just some random kids thing that's happening at the church on a Tuesday morning that you're going to have 20 kids showing up. Find a low-stakes event that you can set this up and run it. And that way, it's not anything that you're getting a bottleneck of 125 people wanting to check in. Like, it's something that you can make sure that it's all in place, that it's working, and that you're able to understand kind of what you're looking at.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Anybody else have any thoughts or questions?
I think so.
Don't think so? Okay. So, Linda, I'm sure you cannot guess what your action item is for the week, can you?
4 pages worth.
4 pages
No.
worth. That's exactly right. So, here's what we need to do, guys. We need to get all of this built into the system. So we need to make sure that we're getting these groups in, that we're getting the events in, so that we're ready to start using check-in fairly quickly after migration is complete. So we want to make sure that we're getting all of this in so we're ready to go, as well as practicing if we need to. So, Thomas, one thing that I would maybe suggest, if you're interested, this is not an action item, this is just a, for instance, use our implementation group. Create just a test event in the group, and use the people who are populating that group currently to test for check-in. Since you don't have anybody in the system yet, like if you want to practice this, if you would like to actually go in and see what a manned saved setup looks like, if you want to go see what a self-saved setup looks like, use our group to practice with that. Because we've got people in our group. It's a group where you can create an event, and we can practice with that in there.
Okay. Yeah, perfect.
Okay. So, all right, guys. Well, listen, I appreciate you sticking around a little bit longer today just so that we could get through that. So next week, we'll continue this conversation around check-in. Make sure, Linda, that you don't have anything that popped up over the week of working on this. And then we'll start talking about like how to train volunteers, how to get them up to speed, as well as where we're going to put these kiosks throughout the building. So we'll have a further discussion about check-in next week.
Thank you.
All right, guys. We'll see you then. Have a great week until then.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. See you guys.